My name is Verna Cachene. I'm with the Yellow Quill First Nation in central Saskatchewan. This presentation is a template for change in regards to the Yellow Quill First Nation story. The federal government has a fiduciary responsibility to First Nations for many areas, including the provision of safe drinking water to First Nation communities. The acceptance of this responsibility has already been demonstrated and has been reiterated many times by the government through its multi-million-dollar delivery agent, the Department of Indian Affairs Canada, better known as INAC. For many First Nations, INAC is the focal point for all services and activity which happens on reserve. We all know there is no other such authority with as much power and control over the lives, lands, and activities of any other community in Canada. Given these circumstances, INAC determines what each First Nation needs and when they will receive funding for their requirements in any given year. Most, if not all, funding for major capital projects is provided through INAC, so they also control how much they will contribute to any project. This has the effect of determining the total cost of the project for those First Nations who do not have additional resources to contribute, which is most First Nations, and limits meaningful participation by First Nations and their advisors. INAC's capital planning process, and in particular the Saskatchewan region, the capital planning process outlined below is for major capital community infrastructure projects only, such as subdivisions, water treatment, waste treatment, etc., and does not include capital planning for education. Suffice it to say that education capital planning has a similar concurrent or parallel process. In about October of each year, a call letter goes out from INAC Regional Office to Tribal Council Technical Services and internally to INAC capital officers. The call package includes the current 5-year capital plan, criteria for project prioritization and substantiation, and project applications. The purpose of the call letter is to update the long-term capital plan, identify major projects to be implemented in the upcoming year, provide more current or relevant information for projects already in the system in order to reprofile the projects for the next 4 years, and to identify new projects. Project applications are then compiled by INAC Technical Services staff working in consultation with Tribal Council Technical Services advisors, and the applications are reviewed by the District Review Committee. Under this process, INAC Regional Office has determined that the District Review Committees will consist of representatives from INAC's District Technical Services Unit, Funding Services Unit, and an INAC Capital Officer. Representatives from the affected Tribal Council's technical unit are invited to attend and review as it pertains to their member bands. Formal project applications are then submitted to INAC Regional Office under the District Director's signature. Regional Office then undertakes a project review and invites the District Review Committees and prepares a draft report which is distributed to district offices. In about March, the regional 5-year capital plan is finalized and the information is released to all proponents, including First Nations. INAC is careful to note that the plan does not reflect approval of projects and that it is not a commitment to the actual year of construction. In this process, there is very little input directly from the First Nations except in a very limited way through Tribal Council Technical Services Unit, and only as it relates to the identification of need and the substantiation of that need. It is INAC that determines whether a First Nation will receive a project, the nature of the project, in what year the project may be received, and ultimately how much funding that project will receive. It is important to cover this aspect of control that INAC has regarding the process. The Yellow Quill First Nation story. What happened? Yellow Quill was on a boil water advisory from 1995 to March 2004. Both INAC and Health Canada officials were aware of the critical situation in Yellow Quill. Sometime in 1997-98, a study was conducted and concluded by INAC, and a determination was made by INAC as to what type of system was required. According to this study, INAC determined that the Yellow Quill First Nation required a green sand filtration and low-pressure treatment plant. This study was requisitioned through an engineering firm which had previous experience in dealing with water treatment systems through INAC. In INAC's view, there is a lot of merit in going with what has been tried and tested. The experienced firm knows the expectations, they know the limits, and they know what is acceptable to INAC. In 1999, the project became due, according to INAC's capital plan. The Council of the Yellow Quill First Nation entered into the process at this time when these critical decisions had already been made by INAC. These critical decisions were: the study was complete, the type of system to be used had been determined, funding had been secured and identified through the 5-year capital plan, and the project had come due. In point of fact, it was long overdue. At this point, INAC had also already selected and appointed a project team, which consisted of INAC technicians and officials, an engineering firm, a project manager, all brought into the project by INAC, and finally a band counselor and a band member to represent Yellow Quill. It's worth noting here that INAC requires that the appointment of a First Nation representative be made by band council resolution, and that the project team be ratified by BCR. It is also worth noting that at this point in the process, a single capital contribution arrangement is signed between INAC and the First Nation so that funding could be released and managed through the project management team. The funding is then released incrementally into a project-specific bank account. The check signer is always the project manager. These items are worth noting because these two items, the ratification of the project team and the appointment of band reps by BCR, and the decentralization of funding through a single capital contribution arrangement, are, in the mind of INAC officials, what makes this a First Nation controlled project. So there we were, Yellow Quill represented by one band counselor, Leonard Pas-Anipines, and one band member, George Pequawquet, on the project team, neither of whom had the expertise nor the confidence in the others around the table that this project team knew what system was best for Yellow Quill. They knew only that the previous system was totally inadequate, that the source was extremely questionable, and that they had no confidence in the system that was being proposed. And it appeared to them that INAC's biggest and only concern was for the budget. Leonard and George recognized the need for outside expert scientific help. In any process, I think that if the intentions of even one person are pure and totally altruistic, it gives permission to the heavens to send a miracle. In our case, our band counselor, Leonard Pas-Anipines, had the pure heart and the intention to do the best for his people, and so our miracle occurred. I say this lightly, but I remain in awe of the exact timing and lining up of events and people it took in order for our help to arrive exactly when we needed it. Our miracle was the good Dr. Hans Peterson, who through a quirk of fate arrived just in time. Leonard met Dr. Peterson through Carla, our Saskatoon Tribal Council technical advisor, and he explained to Dr. Peterson the problems we had with our water and that we had been on a boil water advisory since 1995, at this point going on 5 years. I'm not sure what Dr. Peterson thought or felt about all this, but he agreed to attend the next project team meeting with Leonard. Leonard, excited about the professional help we could now get, went to the next project team meeting full of anticipation and excitement. However, instead of the goodwill and acceptance he had hoped to find, he was confronted with skepticism, rejection of his idea to include Dr. Peterson as a project team member, and refusal to reconsider the proposed system selected by INAC. Leonard and George continued to work with Dr. Peterson, learning from him about water, organic and inorganic chemicals, pathogenic microbes, protozoan parasites, coliforms, water quality standards, raw water sources, chlorine residuals, and so on, until they were fairly certain that the proposed treatment plant was, as instinct had told them, totally inadequate. They were, however, still faced with the problem of convincing INAC that not only was the treatment plant inadequate, but that we continued to need the expert advice of Dr. Peterson to develop a system that would meet the needs of Yellow Quill, regardless of what source was used. Leonard and George continued to meet with resistance until finally in frustration they asked the full council to help them. Leonard arranged for the council to hear a presentation prepared by Dr. Peterson about Yellow Quill's water and the proposed system. The council were convinced that Dr. Peterson was in a better position to determine what was required than any of the other experts we had on the project team. The council converged on the next project team meeting, invited only by the band representatives, and insisted that they would be sitting in on the full project as full project team members until such time as they felt that the team could return to the original group. After several meetings with difficult discussions and a lot of frustration and anger, we had some casualties. 2 of INAC's project team members walked out of one meeting and refused to deal with us any further. Shortly after this meeting, we received a letter from INAC in an attempt to put their foot down and resume control. The letter indicated that they were in charge of the process and that the project, and that the project team had been established, implying that council was not part of the project team. We welcomed the information that INAC was responsible, and we reminded them that they had neglected their duty for 6 years already, and that we were tired of game playing and waiting for a proper water treatment facility. With INAC's letter in hand, we advised that we would go to the media to expose the fact that we had been under boil water advisory for 6 years, and that INAC, although they admitted responsibility, were still refusing to move ahead on our project. A number of things occurred around this time that helped our situation immensely. One was Walkerton and the public outcry it generated. The other was the launch of a class action lawsuit against INAC by a group of 5 band members. Another was the interest CBC had in Yellow Quill's situation and the piece Dr. Peterson had orchestrated. And finally, there was the underlying perception that the council was also considering a lawsuit on behalf of its band members. INAC appointed a new project officer and returned to the table. The question of whether the full council could in fact sit as project team members was answered by their return to the table. We then appointed Dr. Peterson as a project team member and expert advisor for Yellow Quill. We did not encounter any further resistance with the project team composition, alternative solutions, temporary alternatives, or project funding after this. And the rest, as they say, is history. The lessons we've learned through this process can be summarized as follows. Take responsibility and control for meeting your community's needs. It rests with the Chief and Council to ensure that the federal government meets its obligations. Get expert help selected by you, and don't allow INAC to dictate which experts are allowed at the table. Educate yourself and your leadership about your issues, current standards and practices, and possible solutions. Use the tools that are available to you, including the media, legal recourse, and your own political structures. Take control of the process and get involved as early as possible.